Hello, and welcome to this Womanship Behind the Bio. My name is Nicolette Lazarus, and I am the founder of Womanship. And this is where we meet the women and allies behind the wisdom, those women who help us thrive. But behind every conversation or every woman, there is a story and that shapes their life and their works. So if you joined us at the Connected Health Weekend, you'll remember Diane Siepmann, a functional medicine consultant whose grounded science meets soul approach resonated so deeply. She led two amazing sessions, one for professionals, and her ability to blend science and empathy really stayed with so many women. So today we had a few technical problems, so I'm giving her a chance to take a deep breath. We're going behind the bio to explore who she is as a person and how she helps women restore balance. Welcome, Diana.
Hello, and thank you so much for having me for this conversation. So I hope you can see me well since I had to join on my phone. Um,
Can see you perfectly, and it's lovely to have you here. And it was your birthday last week, is that correct?
it was indeed, yes.
Felicitated, happy birthday.
Thank you.
So, how are birthdays for you? Are they a moment to celebrate or escape or reflect?
Um, this time it was a moment of, well, I wouldn't call it escape, but we went away and we actually toured the Netherlands and had a very nice break. So it was more special than if we'd just stayed at home. So I enjoyed that.
Okay, so let's jump in. I am a huge fan of connections. And when I started Womanship, I gave myself this jokey title of Chief Connection Officer.
I love that.
It's become so important, even in the name, the Connected Health Weekend. So I'm going to start with our initial connection. Do you remember when or where we first met?
Well, it was at the weekend, right? Because my connection originally came through Suzanne Ritans, and that's how I learned about the event. And yeah, we met in person the first time there, and I have to say, you did such an amazing job at creating this very safe atmosphere that I think I've never felt before when I came to an event where I presented, that I really deeply felt it wasn't about perfection, but it was about connection and contribution. So that was absolutely, yeah, beautiful.
Oh, thank you so much. We'll be going into that a little bit more later. But continuing on that connections theme, I'm a real believer, the more work that I do with womanship and myself, that we are a sum of things that have happened in our pasts. So whether that's relationships, experiences, good and bad from childhood to now, that bring us to the women we are today. So I'm going to start with my favorite question of all time. What makes you the woman that you are today?
Yeah, I think you see that very, very well because some of the things that happened have taken me down a path that I never expected. So I have a background in marketing communications. I don't have a background in the medical field. And I got here, like so many people in functional medicine, through my own health challenges. Um, so this goes back to 2012, after I had both of my children, which was a difficult journey in itself. And I felt something was off, something was wrong. I was really in survival mode. I didn't function well. I was in pain, and I I fell through all of the nets of the medical system. I just didn't know what was happening. I mean, I was sleep deprived. I had gone through a very difficult period trying to get pregnant, having my children, having lots of pregnancy losses on that way. And when my daughter was born, she was a crybaby. So I wasn't sleeping. My husband was working two jobs at the time. It was tough, and my body gave up on me. And all I knew at the time was to reach out to a doctor. And the biggest issue that I had was pain. Really, I mean, my mental state was not great either, but the pain didn't even allow me to sit on the floor and play with my kids. And I always thought, wow, all these other mums who were quite a bit younger than me, they seem to take life so easily, right? I always wondered what they put in their coffee in the morning. That for me, everything seemed so hard. And so when I saw my doctor, he heard pain, and all he had to offer was anti-inflammatories. And I said, well, there must be something else because I'm breastfeeding. That wasn't my plan to take medication. And I wasn't planning on stopping to breastfeed my daughter. And certainly I wasn't planning on pumping her full of medication, right? So I left. I left empty-handed. I didn't take the prescription. I said, there must be a better way. And if you can't help me, I'm going to figure this out myself. And that is, yeah, that was the start of hearing. I would say today it was probably in the same week, which might not have happened, but I would say in the same week I had an email from somebody that I was subscribed to in the EFT tapping world with a video from Mark Hyman. And that was my first encounter with functional medicine. And when I listened to that, I was like, oh my God, this is the answer. This makes so much sense. This is what I need to learn. This is what's going to help me without medication. That
Okay.
was the start of this journey.
So I want to jump into that journey more, but I want to jump even further back and say, tell me about your childhood, how you grew up. And then I'd love to hear a bit more about what you're talking about, the difficulties with your pregnancies and miscarriages, because I think that's something a lot of women would I deal with. So I really want to go behind
Yeah.
and get to know you.
Okay. Yeah. So going back to my childhood, I grew up in a small town in Germany with two sisters, an older sister, a younger sister. And I grew up in an entrepreneurial family, but more in the industrial sector. So something that didn't, as a child, certainly didn't speak to me. And growing up, it was, compared to seeing my kids grow up, it was a very protected small town. We didn't have big city environment. There was just right on the edge of a forest, so there was outside play, there was school, there wasn't much of questioning about the world. I think I was a very grew up as pretty protected and naive. When I see my daughter now, age 13, being busy with politics and following what's happening in the US, none of that was part of my world. I had my friends, my very best friend, and we spent lots of time together. And I just kind of made my way, right? Going to school was normal, and at some point my dad expected that we would go study. He didn't mind so much what. It was more like whatever you study, your diploma is the entry ticket to the world. And I remember always being a little bit jealous of people who kind of went on their path because they knew it was the right path, because they knew it was their passion. And I never felt I had that clear signal, that clear passion. So I just kind of did, I wanted to go into something creative. I felt like I wasn't quite good enough. Didn't get in. And then what do you do if you're not creative? Go study business. That was kind of my path. And then I focused on marketing because that brought me back to more of that creative side that I wanted to express.
So just a quick question. I'm curious, what number child were you?
I was the middle child.
Oh, I always like to know where people come in their
Yeah.
family setup to see whether that influences how they develop.
Yeah, and it's interesting you say that because I had my best friend was also the middle child. I remember us commiserating about being the middle, right? We're not the little ones who get like they're the ones that everyone needs to take care of. We're not the first to be doing the things that you can only do when you're the oldest. In hindsight, I don't know if that was really remember that we did talk about that.
So I'm the eldest, so I'm always curious at what, I always think I had
Yeah.
it worst because, I had to do everything first, but I'm certain that's not the case. So it's funny that we both have this experience in marketing background because I think that's where I came from as well. So you worked in marketing because it gave you that creative outlet. And then
Yeah.
what happened next in your journey?
Well, I really stayed in marketing communications for a long time, and it wasn't it wasn't conscious, but looking back, I somehow, apart from one role that I had, I always was somewhere in the health space. But that didn't happen on purpose. It's just interesting now looking back that that is what happened, right? And so I grew up in Germany. I moved with, I was married to an Englishman in my previous life, I like to say. I moved to Switzerland. I was still in marketing communications there. And then I moved to Belgium almost 20 years ago. So I'm married to a Flaming now. And
I love
even
that connection as well. I mean, the fact that these are unscripted and we find out about each other on the call. I also had a previous life with a marriage, so
yeah. Yeah, so coming to Belgium, I took some time before picking up another job. Also, when I first came, I didn't speak any Flemish. My French was very poor. It still is poor, but I am fluent in Flemish now. But I started a job in marketing communications for a company that made supplements and skincare. So again, there was this health element there. And then I started the journey of trying to get pregnant, which we did have to do with fertility treatment, and there was a lot of roller coaster hoping, disappointment, a lot of grief over loss. And when I finally had my son, I could not imagine to go back to work. And what a lot of women do here is take 3 months off and then they are back, maybe not full time, but they go back to work. And while I was initially thinking that I wanted to do kind of part time, 50%, going back to work, 50% staying at home, the company kind of made the decision for me, saying, "Well, you are in a management role, and we can't have you work this job part time. It's not possible. So either you're back or you're not."
it's
So
insane how women have to make that choice. And I think for me, I went through multiple miscarriages. I never ended up having children. But I think that motherhood
mm,
is the most important and undervalued job in the world. And it seems that, mothers can't win. If they go back to work, they're criticized. If they stay at home,
yeah.
they criticize.
Yeah, I have to say, I found it hard to make the decision because I couldn't, like, you don't know what motherhood is like before you're there, right? So I really found it quite hard to make that decision. So I thought this was, for me, it was the universe sending me a sign that it was probably the better thing for me to stay home, because going back full time was an absolute no go for me. I didn't wait for 10 years to have a child to then drop off my son early in the morning to just pick him up in time to feed him and put him to bed. So for me, the decision was then made. I'm going to stay at home, and I think that was definitely the right decision. And then it was actually after I had my son that things got really difficult with miscarriages, and my daughter then was born 3.5 years later, and she was a crybaby. So it was tough. It was very tough. I think two years I really didn't sleep through, and that is, I think, what probably broke me is in the end the lack of sleep. But we know that it's this piling up of stress, right? I was in a marriage where my husband didn't want children. Then I'm in a marriage where it's not happening. Then there is all the trying to get pregnant, and then you are pregnant, you see a heartbeat, you go for the next checkup and the heartbeat is gone. It was a really, really hard journey, but the not sleeping is what, like, the straw that broke the camel's back. And I didn't understand any of this because this was before I started my education in functional medicine. So I didn't understand why my system was breaking down.
Right. Did you find that there was a lack of communication in terms of being able to share what you were feeling like going through those processes of miscarrying and the difficulties? Did you find that you had people you could really share that with, or did you find that it was something you were very much carrying on your own?
Well, my husband was very good in the whole process. This was something that we did together. Like he was also the one to make all the appointments. He took the difficult phone calls, right, where we didn't know, was it good news, was it bad news. We were always very open about it. We talked to other people, and it was a little surprise to me that actually quite a lot of couples were struggling, but it was only because we were open, maybe, that they also started being open about it. And then what you do, the experience that you might have experienced yourself as well, is that a lot of people who don't know what it's like, they say things, they mean well, and it's actually maybe not received in the way that they are sending the message, because they don't really understand what it's like. And I joined a support group that was organized by the Brussels Childbirth Trust for women who were going through IVF, and that was really my support network. Even though I didn't know those women so well, because we were all going through the same thing, we could talk very openly, very, very vulnerable, and nobody would say something that would be hurtful.
Yeah.
And I took over that. I did, I think, for almost 4 years, I took over that support group, helping other women as well.
I
When
love that. It's such a womanship thing in terms of, I know going through my miscarriages that it was the same thing. It was only when I started to talk about it, I realized how many women around me had experienced it. And by me opening up, gave them, with the vulnerability, gave them the opportunity to talk about it.
Yeah,
So these support groups and those communities, I think, are insanely important to us. So let's go to, you realized you'd gone to your doctor and he wasn't giving you the support. I think you said that he offered you anti-inflammatories.
yeah. So basically, that was the answer of the conventional medical system: is you have chronic pain, so we counter that with painkillers, right? And it was really at that time more because I didn't want to pump my daughter full of medication that I refused it. At that time, I didn't even know that if you start that journey of taking those non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, that downstream you're going to create all sorts of other problems because they're so bad for your gut. I didn't even know any of that. I just intuitively said, no, I'm not stopping to breastfeed my daughter. I'm not pumping her full of medication. So this is not my answer.
I think there are a couple of things that you've said that I love in terms of you trusting your gut and intuition. And I think it's something that as women, we actually should do more. You said you got the sign that maybe you should stop work because they withdrew the position. You got the sign that, something didn't feel right about taking those drugs that you were being offered. And the listening to that gut and intuition, I think, is such an important part of us as women that we don't necessarily always follow.
Yeah, and I'm probably one who is not typically that great to follow. I'm somebody who second guesses. Yeah, I second guess myself a lot. So those were pretty clear signals that came through that wasn't my answer. And again, you could say the email that landed in my inbox, maybe not the same week, maybe the week after, with that video with Mark Hyman, that was another sign. This is the path. And it gets it gets more interesting. I don't know if I'm skipping ahead too fast for you here, but I this triggered me to start self-study. Everything that I could get my hands on the internet to help myself, right? That was the initial purpose of learning, was to help myself. And I did a lot of trial and error, couple of steps forward, couple of steps backwards, because yeah, I didn't really have the education. I didn't really know what I was doing. I was piecing it together. But the more I learned, the more in awe I was about how our bodies function, all the interconnectedness and the wisdom that is there to help us thrive. And if we give the body what it needs, then we feel good, right? Because then everything works the way it's supposed to work. But if we ask the body to live in an environment that is not giving it the right nutrients, or that is overloading with stress and toxins and just things that are not aligned with how our bodies work, then there's a lot of wisdom to adapt to that environment that we ask the body to live in. And that doesn't necessarily mean it's broken, right? It just means it's doing its best to adapt and to survive at some point in that environment. And I never thought, like at the beginning I said, I never expected to take this path because at school I didn't like biology. I certainly didn't like chemistry. And now I'm a geek in human biochemistry. So this came as a complete surprise to me, because it is such a different approach to, it's not medicine. To me, it's an approach to human health. To me, that is a big difference. And that is that something that really caught my passion. And when I said before, I was always jealous of people who kind of knew their path because they already had that passion. I discovered this quite late in life. And it just feels right. Yeah.
It's amazing when you get that sense of purpose almost. And I know that I feel it with womanship. It's not that I didn't have purpose in what I was doing before, but when you feel that you're doing something that can make a difference to people, it's such an amazing driver, isn't it? I mean, you get on this
It,
path, it's like, oh my gosh,
and it is like, right, it started out with helping myself, and then I thought, wow, this is just so, it's too good to keep to myself. I need to learn this properly. I need to get more structured, and I need to figure out how to use this to help others. And again, like you say, the purpose was fueling this to move forward. And then I knew the next step would have to be formal education, because all the self-study was great, but I was missing a system. I was missing the how do you piece it together. If I can do it for myself doesn't mean I can do it for somebody else, because everybody is different, right? So I found this training program that I wanted to join, and I wasn't really in the financial position to just say, yep, that's it, I'm going to sign up and this is what I'm going to do. So I had talked to a few people about this training program, and there was somebody who I had met at one of these Brussels international events, and we had a really nice conversation. We didn't really know each other very well, but she told me that she was interested in health, and I mentioned this to her, this program, and she had 3 little kids under 6 at the time. And she said to me, well, I don't know, it sounds really super fascinating, but I don't think it's the time for me. But are you going to do it? And I said, yeah, I don't know yet how I'm going to do it, but I do want to do it. And I know I'll be on that next program, but I need to find the money, kind of. So I just put that out there. And this beautiful soul, Katerina Svikova, she contacted me a little while later, and she said, look, I have the money, you have the time, let me pay for you.
that
And
is
I
so
thought, oh,
beautiful.
wow. And I almost didn't. I was like, oh, I can't possibly accept this gift, right? But again, it was one of these signs. This was meant to be, and I was grateful, and I accepted that gift. And that was the next step on this journey. And I'm forever grateful.
You make
And
me tear.
yeah,
Okay, it makes me teary. This is when women support women, amazing things happen. And I think our natural thing is to help other women. As you said, you were driven from your personal seeking for answers to then broaden this. And I honestly think a lot of people talk about female competition, but I honestly think if we go back to before patriarchal systems, that's our natural base level to help each other.
yeah, yeah. Well said. And it's, in our modern world, it takes a little bit to accept something like that, because yeah, a lot of things were going through my mind there. But in the end, I just thought, wow, this it seems again like it was arranged by the universe, right? It was meant to be.
Yep, that gift. I love it.
And I kept her up to date, and it's like she feels like she has a part in what I can do to help other women, right? So it's yeah.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful. So you went through your training, and I think it would be really maybe interesting to tell us what functional medicine is, because I
Yes.
think we hear it a lot. And I loved what you said earlier about, looking at the body as a whole. So for me, with womanship, I'm trying to look at all the areas that women worry about because they all influence our stress and our health. So that's from career and finance to sex and relationships. It's not siloed, which I think the traditional medical system tends to be quite siloed. So maybe you can explain to everybody what functional medicine is and what you actually look at and do.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that, and I think to do that, it's important to maybe first say what for me what conventional medicine is, because conventional medicine is very important. We need conventional medicine for certain things, and for me, that is the medicine for acute anything that is acute, an acute problem. We need that conventional medicine to be very quick and astute in making a diagnosis and then act to potentially save lives, right? So that could be for somebody who's being pulled out of a car wreck and is bleeding out. That is a broken bone. That is a pneumonia. That needs antibiotics. That is an acute heart attack. That all of those things that where we really need that quick. We need to assess the situation. We need a diagnosis, and we need to fix this now. Where things go wrong in my mind is if we apply that same approach to anything chronic, and a lot of the health issues that we see today, the blood sugar issues, the autoimmune disease, the gut problems, the mood issues, the unexplained weight gain, the joint pain, all of those things are typically a result of an addition of different lifestyle choices that do not do well with that approach of let's diagnose and then manage the symptoms, potentially even with medication, right? So functional medicine comes in and says, well, those symptoms that you feel, they are a result of something that is not working as designed in your body. So let's go and dig for that root cause. Let's go and find where things have gone wrong. Where is there a blockage? Where is there something missing, like maybe nutrients? Where is there um, something that is too much, like toxins, for example? Can the body cope? Can the liver cope with getting rid of that? So it's really looking for the underlying root causes, then addressing those, and as a result, then the symptoms often improve or even go away. And to me, that is what convinced me so much about this approach. That's why I say it's maybe not even medicine, it's a lot more about health optimization than our modern medicine. Our conventional system is more the sick care side of things, where the functional medicine is on the health optimization side of things.
So, how did that come to life in terms of your own journey? Because you said that you went through a period of chronic pain, for example. What was it along the functional medicine route that helped you resolve that for yourself?
Yeah, so that was a lot of that was initially about food, with the situation that I was in, with my daughter crying all the time, my husband working two jobs. I was super tired, so my our diet had deteriorated to pretty much microwave food and popping pizzas in the oven. Yeah, that was a very bad start from a nutrition point of view. Probably also the stress already added to poor digestion, and the poor sleep. So that was a very bad combination of things. And initially, I had joined some course in the US where I buddied up with a nutrition expert, and she helped me initially to clean up my diet. And I said, but I'm so tired, I cannot cook. And it was very simple things to begin with. And then I also got more into the looking at potential food sensitivities. So I started excluding certain foods. I've been gluten free for a very long time, and it over time, this is not like a painkiller that works in half an hour, right? This is something that over time starts to quench that inflammation in the body, that also then helps with improving the sleep. Of course, what also helped was that we figured out when my daughter was almost 2 years, I think, we figured out that she had silent reflux, and that is why she was crying so much. So when we could solve her crying and keeping me up all night, the sleep improved. So it was a long journey with a lot of trial and error. but I did manage to get rid of the pain. And interestingly enough, that's kind of what got me into the perimenopause menopause space, because at some point, like out of the blue, the pain was back, and I thought, whoa, how's that possible? Where did that come from?
You think you've solved it. I think
Yeah.
this is what happens to so many women when they approach perimenopause. And it's almost like, okay, finally, I've got life under control. I know what's happening. You know, I've gone through all the hardship. And then you get like this slap in the face, which is like, oh my gosh, I've got no idea what is now happening.
Yeah, and I then realized that even though my training was excellent, really, I mean, I hear that in conversations with doctors of different specialities, that doctors are always really impressed with the depth and the breadth, because I don't have the siloed education, right? I have the really the very broad education. Um, and at the beginning, I also, when I started doing this job, I didn't want to pick a niche, because I get bored very easily, and I thought I do want the breadth, and I want the experience in everything. And at that point, I realized that in my education, that whole perimenopause menopause story was probably not covered in as much depth as a lot of the other things, like you know, when you have the HPA axis dysfunction, which we call in layman's terms the adrenal fatigue, or the thyroid problems, or the gut. So that the perimenopause menopause was something definitely that we heard about, but it wasn't, the depth wasn't there. And for me, the pain and the perimenopause didn't click directly. So it took me a little while to connect the dots there. But then when I dove into learning more on the backdrop of the education that I had, it was very easy to bring this on board. And that's where I think it's really helpful that I have the breadth of what I did before, because now I can bring all of those things in as well, because we cannot focus on just the hormones, right? When we hit that the perimenopause, quite often symptoms that were already lingering before, they just get exaggerated. They don't fall out of the sky with perimenopause. So it's really important even there to go back to look at the thyroid, to look at the gut, to connect the dots, so that we don't have this idea that HRT all of a sudden is the magic bullet that's going to solve all the issues, right?
And I think it is. I love this coming back to connecting the dots. Again, my
Yeah.
fascination with connections, because I think, you know, part of what we're led to believe through your description, for example, of the current medical system as, you know, valuable as it is, and almost the way that we consume everything in life. It's like we want quick fixes. We just want the answer to what is wrong. We want that one pill that's going to set us in the right track. And actually, that thoughtful consideration as to how does everything come together to build our health. As you said, it's not silos, it's how everything works together. And I don't think medicine looks at it in that way at all. So, this holistic, more holistic approach seems to make sense for us.
Yeah, and this is right for somebody without the medical education. It seems to really be so much common sense. That's how I connected to this very first webinar that I listened to with Mark Hyman. That I thought, like, wow, this is what medicine should be. It, this is common sense. But I realize now that a lot of how things work today are so intertwined with our health insurance system. And you know, I quite often hear, but yeah, healthcare should be free. And in Belgium, you know, we have a very good national healthcare system, but really it's sick care that's free. It's not healthcare that's free. Sick care is free. And I think in the Netherlands that's probably even more extreme. If you imagine like a wellness illness continuum, so if you're on the left, if you imagine the kind of the illness, right, it's from the middle point where you have, let's say, no disease. That's a neutral point. You feel just okay. If things start to go off, if you move to the left, you first have a few signs. You don't go see the doctor when you feel a few signs, right? But if you don't listen to them, you just brush them off, they might get worse. Now you have symptoms. This is the area of dis-ease. Maybe you still don't go to see a doctor. Maybe you go to the pharmacy, maybe get some paracetamol for the headache. But then again, if you don't do anything, this ease can quickly turn into diagnosable disease. And that is where our medical system operates. It's where we have diagnosable disease. That's where you can get testing. That's where you can get that by the health insurance covered medical support. But do we want to wait until we are on that track to from disease to diagnosable disease to premature death? Do we want to wait for that? Or do we want to say, my doctor doesn't own my health? The state doesn't own my health. I own my health, right? And that is moving from that middle point in the other direction to the right. That's moving towards growth, towards learning, towards building resilience so that when I get sick, I can handle a little bit of that because I don't directly go all the way into the red. I go a little bit into the orange and then I can recover because I've built that resilience. And that's, I think, where we all need to ask ourselves, right? Where's my own responsibility for my health and that journey of healthy aging? If we then think of lifespan versus health span, right?
I couldn't love what you've just said more. I mean, I really couldn't. That whole thing about disease is something that I've talked about before and really believe in. How much of that do you think comes from a lack of understanding or education from an early age about our own bodies and
I,
understanding anything to do with them? Because I was always amazed, obviously at perimenopause, it struck me how little we knew. But then when I looked back, how little we knew about our periods, how little we knew about getting pregnant or our body's responses to certain things. It felt like there was no education about us.
yeah, no, I would agree with that. And I often say a lot of these things, especially also about the impact of stress on the system, and the techniques maybe to cope, right? Those little things like meditation and maybe even EFT tapping or breathing techniques. I often say this is stuff that should be in the schools, like from kindergarten. It should be something that is taught like brushing your teeth. It should just be a normal part of your educational system, but of course it's not. um, and then if I think back to my biology and chemistry classes, it didn't grab me, it didn't catch me, it didn't talk about, like, I don't even remember ever learning about anatomy or physiology in biology classes. I did a year in the US, and there I had a biology class that was all focused on anatomy and physiology, and I loved that. It just never clicked with me that maybe that is something that I should have taken further, because the year after I was back in the German system and I wasn't exposed to that anymore. So how much can we bring into earlier education if children are not at the right age to be interested? That's something that I don't know. I wish there was more education, but does it really sink in when you're young and you think you're immortal? Um,
But I think it's also the way that we're taught. I mean, for me, I was taught biology. My dad was a biologist, is a biologist, but there was no connection to self. There was no, how it actually applied to me or how I as an individual went through life. It felt like it was completely missing from my education. Who was I within the knowledge I was given?
yeah, yeah, I would say that's definitely true for me as well. I'm just trying to ask the honest question. Do you need to be at a certain level of consciousness before you can bring certain things on board? And I have to say, for me, when if you told me 10 years ago or 15 years ago that I would be going down this path and I would become a geek in human biochemistry, I would have probably laughed. But for me, a big change happened when I saw my parents age, right? My dad had Parkinson's disease, and I saw him deteriorate for the past seven some years of his life. And my mom passed away from a complication of surgery she had to have because she had cancer. So she didn't even die from the cancer. She died as a result of the or after the surgery. And to me, that was a wake up call to say, that is not how I want to age, right? That is where I start taking responsibility and say, I had my children late, so I still want to be around for my grandchildren. This is what drives me to make different choices. And I know I have predisposition for some of this, right? So if I don't make the right choices for my body, then the risk is there that I'm going to have similar challenges.
So there are two things I want to touch on. Just one quite quickly is, how do we help people get to this level of consciousness? Because it's not just consciousness about our bodies, it's consciousness of, I guess, a different way of thinking that's not what the system tell us. Can we help people? And this sounds like I'm putting us in a superior bracket. It's just a different level of understanding. How can we help people reach that consciousness level about themselves, their bodies, the system?
Yeah, I think that is where education and community and connection and just talking about this more is crucial. And I think you're doing a great job with creating this community where people who have at least have the curiosity to learn more about seeing things differently, right, can come together and can grow in that community. I know when I first went through my education, I thought this is so good, everybody needs to know. And I talked to everybody about this, whether they asked me or not. And that's not the way to do it. I've realized that. I think we all when we I've talked to a lot of colleagues who went through the same process. When we are so in awe and so passionate that we feel like everybody needs to see the light as well, that when you're not asked, that often doesn't go down so well. So I have changed to offering this information to people who are open and curious, also because it's just so much more rewarding when you know it's received with curiosity and with that I want to learn, I want to understand, I want to do something with this. um, so how can we get it to the broader audience? I really hope and wish that there are people who have the energy and the stamina at a political level to make changes to this health insurance system so that it's not sick care, that it becomes true healthcare, and that we do invest more in prevention, and that we do reward the healthy choices. Because right now there's very little incentive other than if you find it intrinsically, right? There's very little incentive to do things differently. And we all want to belong. So if the norm is to eat fast food and to drink lots of alcohol and to stay up late, then you have to be a pretty strong character to say, I'm going to do this differently. I'm going to be the deviant. I'm going to look after myself even if I'm not popular. So there's a much bigger conversation to be had. And while initially I thought maybe that's something that I also want to do at the political level, I realized that I don't have that in me to have those conversations where you quite often like hit the wall, right? I much prefer to change one life at a time. And now with my role at the lab, also being able to support practitioners so that I have that ripple effect, right? That I can support practitioners to help more people. That is what fills my cup.
And I think this thing about change is something that's so behind what I believe in. So, yes, it's about connecting to talk about the things that we worry about our health, worry, and stress. But it's also about coming together and saying, as women, we need the systems around us to change. And for one person to stand up and do that change, as you said, is difficult. But if we start supporting each other in what is change that's best, not just for us as women, but for everybody, then together, was my favorite, individually we are one drop, together we're an ocean.
Yes, beautifully said. Yes.
So I wanted to talk to you about DNA and your interest in that side of things, because on one side you're talking about functional medicine, which is about understanding these systems and isn't about, well, maybe you can explain it better than I'm trying to at the moment. But I know that you are part of DNA Life.
Yes.
And maybe you can explain a little bit more about that and what happens there and how that links to the functional medicine and our overall health.
Yeah. So it's interesting that in my studies I didn't learn so much about DNA. It there were a couple of genes that come up here and there in certain conversations. Those are maybe the genes that people have heard about, the COMT, yeah, the COMT gene, the MTHFR, the ApoE. Those are genes that popped up in my training. But I remember my teacher, who's absolutely brilliant, I remember her quite often saying, "Yeah, but if we look at the genes, we're only looking at the blueprint, and we know, luckily, we know now that we have epigenetic influence on the gene expression." And so for her, she never really did a deep dive there. And I wonder today, with what I know through my training with DNA Life, if that was because a lot of the DNA companies actually do very broad gene analysis, analyzing thousands, tens of thousands of genes, where the science isn't there quite yet to say that if we find variations on all of these genes, that we can indeed epigenetically influence that gene expression. So I think that may be the reason why it wasn't a big feature in my training. But what I love about the DNA Life approach is that it was very early on, it was decided to say we only report on the genes where the science is there, with at least 3 independent studies to show that it is indeed epigenetically influenceable, that we can modify, and that the science is also there to show that the recommended interventions actually give you a measurable result. So in a blood test or in a functional test, in any real-time test, that you actually see a difference. And that is something that really felt a very strong value proposition to me, to say that all of the genes that are analyzed, if variations are found, they are all actionable. It's not just information, because if you don't know if you can change it, it is just information. And if it's the negative information, it could have a nocebo effect, right? We all know about placebo, but you have the opposite of nocebo as well. And that is something that is just as powerful as placebo. So we don't really want that. So looking at the test options that are there through DNA Life, knowing that everything is actionable, I feel that is a huge piece of empowerment. And I it's of course also a budget question, right? But when the budget is there, I really don't want to work without that DNA insight for 2 reasons. One is it gives me more insight as a practitioner, but the other piece is that it explains a lot of things to the person about how what their own where their own priorities are, where their own risk areas are. And it really helps to motivate that behavior change and the compliance, because now I'm not saying you you might need more vitamin B12 or vitamin D, or more magnesium or whatever it may be, because I think that's the case. It's because your genetics put you at a higher risk, and we can do a blood test to confirm if maybe you are getting enough through your diet, right? If you have a high priority genetically on inflammation, you probably need more omega-3 than somebody else. We all need omega-3, either through food or through supplements, because we can't make it. But if you have a high risk for inflammation, and people typically feel also if they are inflamed, and you know that you have that genetic risk, to then take that omega-3 supplement, because you cannot imagine to eat fatty fish 3 or 4 times a week, that now makes sense. That is not questioning the budget that I put aside for the supplements, right? And I of course did my own DNA, and I discovered a couple of things that I was surprised about. I always thought my detoxification was my biggest challenge, but really it is inflammation. And that might explain also why, when I hit perimenopause and I'm now postmenopausal, that the pain came back, because that is one of my weak areas. It is inflammation. So I have doubled my omega-3 intake, and I'm a lot more consistent than I was before. And I think if I do that with all the knowledge that I have, how powerful is that information for somebody who doesn't know that omega-3 is so important, right? When you have that inflammatory picture.
I think this is fascinating. I think we need to do another session just on the DNA side of things and what the tests can help us understand. So I would love to do that with you. A couple of things, because time has just flown by. I could keep talking to you for ages. So much valuable information, and just lovely to speak to you as a person and see where that knowledge and insight and passion to help women comes from. So, a couple of things. You ran two amazing sessions at the Connected Health Weekend, and next Tuesday evening, Wednesday evening,
Wednesday, I think it's the 5th. Yes.
you are rerunning your session for professionals uh,
Yes.
online. So everybody who missed it, because I know we tried to get a lot into those days, and people are like, I wanted to see everything. So maybe you can share a little bit more about that professional session, and then also I think we're going to try and set a date as well as for you to want to run the one for women in general. So maybe you can talk about the sessions that you will be running, so that people know why they
Well,
have to attend.
okay. Yeah, so the professional session, I did something a little bit different. I presented a case study of one of the ladies who came to me because she felt her HRT wasn't working. And of course, even though it's totally anonymized, I do have her permission that I use the case. But it's a very good example that shows how important it is that we keep that open mind and look at the bigger picture and not just feel that HRT is this magic bullet that is going to solve everything. And I have come up with this term, HRT tunnel vision. This is what somehow keeps cropping up with when people come to me and they say, "Yeah, I've been on HRT for a while, and it doesn't seem to, like, we don't seem to get it right, and it's not working." I would say in most cases that I've seen, there's something else going on, and that's why I brought out this case, which is not, unfortunately, we're not as far through the process that I can also deliver this is what we've done, and this is the end result. So it really is more about broadening the 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 view on what could be the drivers behind the symptoms, and not just reduce it to the low estrogen and the low progesterone.
I love that. And obviously you're allowing time for professionals to ask questions so that you can really have that sort of personal interaction. It's not just a lecture, it is about that interaction with the professionals, health and wellness professionals who will be attending, correct?
Yes, and that is why I have actually foreseen an hour and a half, because I realized that I was a little bit too ambitious at the weekend there, that I had to skip quite a number of slides, and there wasn't really much time for conversation. So I did foresee, so starting at 7:30 and then about an hour and a half, so that hopefully we can have that conversation at the end. And also, I from these conversations I learn, and I hope that there will be practitioners who may be able to help answer some of the open questions in how to help this lady to progress with this case. And that's where we're coming back to that health insurance and what is possible and how can she get further testing. So hopefully I can also learn something on the other side of this.
That's fantastic. I can't believe that we're almost at the end of time. And there's so many things I wanted to talk about, like your perimenopause cafe and practitioner circles. But what I would love you to do is share some of the information about that on the Womanship platform. For me, it's all about getting all these wonderful health and wellness professionals' information out to more women. Thank you so much for sharing your story and the science and the knowledge that both can coexist, the knowledge that we have about our bodies and we need to know, and the science. And that health actually really starts with connection with ourselves and our bodies. You can find out more information about Diana's session on the 5th on the Womanship platform, and we'll also be sharing when she'll be doing her a session where women can learn as well in the coming weeks. Anything you'd like to add before we close?
Well, I think you've just said something beautiful. I think that's nice to close with. That the connection, it's not just the connection with each other, but the connection with ourselves, right? Is to get, and I'm guilty of that. I'm in my head a lot, but we need to really all get into our bodies more and feel that connection with ourselves more, because that is the space where we can make the right decisions for our bodies, our health.
Thank you so much for joining me. It's been an absolute pleasure getting to know you and having this conversation. And I look forward to having more in the future. Thank
Thank you so much, Nicolette.
you. Okay. Bye.
Thank you.